Okay, so in this video, we'll be creating an invoice template from an invoice template. Now that's a sentence I never thought I would say. So let's go under File, and I'm gonna go New, and from Template. And this should give us some pre-made templates that come with Google Sheets, right? So if I scroll down a little bit, we have this work section, and one of those is invoice. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on this. Zoom out a little bit. So this is the template we have. So we're gonna take this, use whatever the designer did here to make this look really nice, and make it better from our perspective. There are some things I'm gonna change here. So I don't want this invoice over here. I would like to move that here on top. I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna take both of these, cut, which is Control X or Command X. You can probably also do right click cut, and then go over here someplace and do Command V to paste it. And apparently that had a lot of merged cells with it, so it created this extra columns with it. But I'll deal with that in just a little bit. I would like to move this invoice numbers and all that stuff here someplace. So I'm gonna take this and again cut it and place it over here. Maybe I'll do it right here on the left, just like this. So let me unmerge these. So I'm gonna select these, go under this and unmerge. I'm also gonna unmerge these. I don't really need this submitted on. Delete that. So invoice number, I'm gonna move this invoice number here, and that seems to be merged too. So I'm gonna unmerge these, and then I'm gonna move a copy of this down. So one of these will be the date, and the other one will be the due date. So that should be okay. And if you wanted more of this, you can obviously just repeat this again to have some extra things here. Maybe I'll move this one up. So I'm gonna take this again, Control or Command X, go on top here and paste. And here I don't need a due date anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna unmerge all of this stuff. Now, if you need this payable to, etc., you can keep it. You can even move it a little bit here if you wanted to. Here, I don't need this much space, so maybe I'll delete one or more rows. A couple of other things I'm gonna do here where we have the total, I don't want this color for this. So let's just change it to something like that and make it a little smaller. And I'll use this design for total price. I'll just copy that and paste it. Oh, apparently this is merged too. Let's get rid of that. And this is in the wrong cell then. So we're gonna cut and paste it here again. And we're gonna move this thing, a copy of that in here so we can have some text, total. I'm gonna add a line here to push this down a little bit. So that's our total. I have this extra columns now because of those merged cells I had. So I'm gonna delete that. Get this back to this invoice, probably too large. Let's bring it down a little bit. Now we have subtotal here. We have adjustments. We could add something like tax percentage and tax, assuming you might have lines like that too. So I'm basically just gonna add a couple of lines below this. And you don't have to do it if you don't have them, obviously. And I'm simply just gonna copy and paste this. This one will be the tax rate. And this one will be the tax amount. And I'll just type some percentage here. I will add one more line here. And we'll have something like adjusted total. And let's make this a little bigger to match this. So this is 14. Let's make this 14 too. So now let's take a look at this to see what this looks like. So if I go under File and do Print, and we're going to change this from landscape to portrait. So it fits on one page, looks pretty good. So I think they did a pretty good design on this. I'm going to cancel that. Again, you can change this colors and stuff if you wanted to. Now, the main thing we're going to work on here is the formulas. First of all, let me just take care of this part really quickly because that's going to be pretty easy. So we have the subtotal. For now, we'll keep what it is, which currently is just the sum of this column. Adjustments, it's just a number that's entered. That's fine. Adjusted total is going to be our subtotal plus our adjustments. That plus that, 500. The tax rate is going to be whatever the tax rate is, and this is going to be a calculation which should be our adjusted total multiplied by that percentage. So again, this is just a basic this plus this, and this is our adjusted total multiplied by the tax rate. So we got the tax, and our total balance will not be this anymore. So we'll take that off, and it's going to be our adjusted total plus the tax. So this grid over here, if I go here, let's say we need to add more items, and I add a row. See how it goes gray, white, which is great. So that's done using this alternate colors. So if I open that, see, it shows me the range that was used for alternate colors. And if you wanted to change that, you can change the gray to some different color and white to a different color. But I'm going to leave it as is. I like the design. But that's the reason when I'm adding a new row, it automatically formats it as it's needed to be formatted. But the problem with this is that these new rows, when I go here and type quantity and I type price, the total is not going to populate. So we're going to change that. So we want this to be more dynamic. So let me delete some of this. I also don't want the zeros here. Basically, I want to only do the calculation if there is some quantities and prices entered. And the other thing that could be potentially a problem here is this total. So right now, this total refers to this range. So let's see what happens if we decide. Apparently, they have some hidden stuff here. So let's see what happens if we decide to go in here and add maybe a new line. If I go to this, see, it's no longer including that in our total, which is not great. So I'm going to undo that. So that's primarily what we're going to work on. We need to make sure that this is auto-populating and this is changing automatically. So let's see how we're going to do that. So usually, if you're doing something like this, you would use an array, right? I'm going to demonstrate this here on the side, and then we'll kind of bring that over as we get it to work. So for example, if I was trying to do an array, I would say, let's take all of these and multiply by all of these. And then I would do an array formula wrapper for this, which you could type, or you can do Control-Shift-Enter or Command-Shift-Enter to get it around this thing. So now if I hit enter, you'll see how it basically drags the formula down from this first cell going over. So with this new setup, if I just go here and add a new row, see, my formula recalculates. It gives me the total, which in this case is 0. And if I go here and add some quantity and price, this also recalculates. But it's likely not going to work if we add it to the bottom. See, that did not recalculate. So now I can go here and type quantities and prices. That doesn't do anything. So if we add in the middle of the range, it's fine, but otherwise it's not. So it fails. So it would be nice if we can make this work even if we add to the bottom of the range or to the middle or something like that. So I'm going to undo that. I am going to need some space here, so I'm going to add a couple of columns here for the time being. So let's see how we can make this happen. So I need this to work no matter if we add to the bottom, to top, or in the middle. So basically the way I'm going to do that, I want to say I want my range to start right below this total price cell or unit price or whatever, one of these column headers. And I want it to go right above this. So in this case, this subtotal line. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to go here and use, first of all, offset function. Close this. So offset function gives us a cell reference. So for example, I can use this column header as a cell. And then after the comma, I can say how many rows I want to move down or up from that cell, or how many columns I want to move right or left from that cell. Now in this case, I'm going to say move one row down. So that's one, comma. And then the next one is how many columns we want to move right or left. So I want to stay in the same column, so I'm going to do 0. So if I do this and hit enter, see how it went 1 down. So that gives us this 200. So let's do another offset. And this time I'm going to take this subtotal, comma, and then from here I'm going to do -1 to go 1 row up, comma, and 0, the same column. Now there's nothing in that cell over here, so we get nothing. Let's actually type something for the time being, so we can see we get that 50. Now, what's cool about offset is that offset, if you pay attention to what this says, if I open this help, it says that the return is a range reference. What that means is that I can take this offset without the equal sign. I'm going to remove it out of there and come back in here. And then this is my first offset that I did. So imagine like this was like F18. Actually, I'm going to undo that for a second so I can illustrate this. So if I was trying to do this range, I would do something like this. See, F18 through F22. So F18 colon F22. So we're giving it the first cell and then colon and then the last cell. And that gives us the range. Now I'm going to use that same logic with this. Now the offset function returns a range reference, which means what we could do, we can cut that out without the equal sign, go back to this. This is similar to having that F18 or whatever it was. And then I'm going to do a colon and paste my second offset function, which is the reference to the last cell. So I'm going to hit enter for a second. And you can see how that now returns, well, not formatted very well, but it returns this range from this cell through this cell. Now I'm going to do the same thing with quantity column. So it's literally going to be the same formula. So if I just copy this, hit escape, go to this column on the right, and instead of F column, this is E column. So I'm going to change this to E and this to E. Hit enter. And now it should give us 1 and 2 because that's what we have here. If I go here and add like 7, you'll see it shows up in here. So now I'm going to multiply these two together to get this total price column. So to do that, we're going to take this, hit escape without the equal sign, go back to this formula, and we need to take this and multiply it by that other formula. So I'm going to put this in parentheses just to make this clear, even though I don't think it's really necessary. And I'm going to multiply it by, again, parentheses and paste that other offset function and close parentheses again. So I'm taking that first range from the first offset that I did and multiply by the second range of offset that I did here on the right. So I hit enter. Right now you can see I didn't really get what I wanted to get. I wanted to get this whole thing. And that's because this is supposed to work as an array formula, and we need that array formula wrapper again for this to happen. Because when you multiply two ranges, you have to use array formula to make it happen, similar to what I did before with my basic array formula. So I'm going to do that Control-Shift-Enter or Command-Shift-Enter to do the array wrapper. Hit enter. And you can see how we got all of these. Now, I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that formula. So now I'm going to go here, remove all these formulas they did here, and I'm going to replace that with my own array formula. which is basically this. So cut that, paste it in here. And you can see we got the same results, right? Now let's try what happens when we add a new row. So if I go here in the middle, add a row, and do some sort of numbers, you can see that works as you would expect. Now let's see what happens when we add to the bottom. So if I go to this line 23 and add one below, you can see how my formula is still working. So that part is good so far. Now let's see what happens when we add to the top of this though. So if I add one above, my formula failed. And the reason that it failed is that our formula is no longer in that first row where the formula was here on top. So as we add a new above this, it pushed the formula down and it's trying to now still do the range. It doesn't fail because of the range. The range is still getting it, but it's trying to fill the range. Now there's one more than it needs, so it's covering this. So the position of the formula is the problem. We don't want this formula to actually be in the first row. We want this formula to be somewhere outside of this range where people are adding, so this whole situation doesn't happen. So I'm going to undo this. So I want to take that formula and somehow put it in here where it says total price. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this formula. That's our array formula. Just cut this formula for a second. So I'm going to go back to this place. This is where I want to place my formula so it doesn't get on the way of doing things here. So I'm going to go here and just create a new formula right here where the header is. And I'm going to start with an equal sign. And for now, I'm just going to paste what I had. So let's get rid of two equal signs. We don't need that. So the problem with this formula is going to be if I hit enter. See that autofills this, but that's not in the right place anymore. So this should be one down and we should have a header here on top. So I want to create that header on top. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go here. Let me do some spacing here. This parentheses and this parentheses are for this array formula that we're doing here. And this is the actual formula we have in the middle. I'm going to create an array here by adding a bracket. And then I'm going to close this array in the end by adding another bracket in the bottom. And I want to add a new row on top of this array that's going to say total price. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go right after that curly bracket. And in quotes, I'm going to do total price, quotation again. And I'm going to do a semicolon to add a row. So the rest are going to act as a row below this first row, which is now going to be total price. So let's hit enter now to see what happens. So you can see how now we have total price on top and we have all of these totals, but there is really no formula here anymore in this range of totals. It's a formula on top here that just populates this whole thing. So now let's try this again. So let's add a new row here on top. Works just fine, as you can see. So add in the middle. Works just fine. Add in the bottom. Works. So now we have an actual working formula that will automatically populate these totals without having to come back and make any changes. And there are really no formulas in front of our user here. It's basically hidden in our total price header right here on top of this whole thing. So now let's clear some of these totals. So the last thing I would like to do with this formula, I don't want this to calculate and do any zeros here until we put some quantities here in this column. So to handle that, we're going to go back to our formula. And this was that previous formula with offsets and everything that was doing what it's doing. So that's everything that's happening after the semicolon. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to add a little bit of if statement to handle that situation. Now, the if statement needs to be on that quantity column. Now, if you remember the way we did that quantity, we did it using this offset when we started. No, actually, that's not quantity. The quantity is this E column right here. This thing right here. So from offset +1 to -1 from this cell on top through this cell in the bottom. So I'm going to just copy that part. You want to be very careful with this parentheses because this outside parentheses are for this multiplication. I don't want to get that, just the range itself. I'm going to go in front of this whole thing, and we're going to place an if statement here. We'll say if, open parentheses, and we'll do that if logic in just a second. Right now, I'm just going to say true, so we can come back and replace it. I'm going to do comma. So I'm going to say if true, then I'm going to do double quotes, meaning to leave it blank, comma. Otherwise, what we need to do after this comma, we need to basically close this if statement. And that if statement is going to close right before this curly bracket. So we have the parentheses here. So now we have to do this statement. So we're going to say if the quantity is blank, then we're going to do this blank. And that's what we need to do instead of this true. So what I'm going to do instead of this true, I'm just going to paste that offset thing I used to have before. That's creating the range. And I'm going to say if that equals to blank, then we're going to leave it blank. The total price part is still staying on top of this. So I'm going to hit enter so you can see what happens. See how we cleared up all the blanks? So if I go here and add some quantity, you can see how the total price starts working again. And we do the calculation. But if we go back and remove those quantities, it doesn't really calculate the price for that particular line anymore. So that should do it for our total price formula. So there it is. We have one formula on top here that takes care of this whole situation. And we don't have to worry about adding new rows or deleting rows or whatever. It's just going to automatically work out. So now let's take care of this thing. So in here, we have, again, the sum function that currently just sums this range up to here. So we need this sum function too to work with this logic that it always has to go from this cell in the bottom of total price up to this cell right above sum total. So I'm going to use that same sort of thing I did before. I'm going to remove this, and instead of G18, I'm going to overwrite that G18 with offset function. So remember, it just returns a range. So that's basically the part before the colon. So the beginning part, again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say, let's take this cell, which is our total price, comma, go one row down, which is, let me open this so you can see the reference. See, row offset is 1, comma, and column offset is 0. So I want to go one row down from that cell that I just clicked on. So right now, if I'd enter, this should still work. So what it does, it again finds this cell right below and goes up to G21. Now again, I'm going to replace G21 also with an offset function. So I'm going to do offset. And then this time I want to offset from the cell that I'm currently in. I want to go one cell above of where I am. Where I am right now is G24. So I'm going to do G24, comma. Then I want to go one row up. So that's -1, comma. And I want to stay in the same column. So that's 0. So I'm going to hit enter. So we got 732. Now let's see what happens when we do our changes. So this should work if we add some quantities here. It's no problem. Now the issue was if we were adding something here to the bottom, this was not calculating here in the total. Now let's see if it does now. Take a look here. It's almost $900. We're going to do some quantity and price, and you can see how that's automatically added to our total. No problems. Now we can add it here. No problem too. That should add, and we should be able to add to the top as well. So right now it's about 1,300. So let's add one more row above, do some numbers. Now before I hit enter, let me just move out a little bit. So you can see that adds up just fine, no problem. All the new rows I'm adding, no matter where they are, it's automatically a part of this total. And I can go ahead and delete some rows as well. And that should just adjust fine for both formulas. Now the rest of these are going to be fine because they're static. So we're not planning to add rows and remove rows and stuff like that. So we'll just leave them as basic formulas. And here, anytime we want to add something, we can add anywhere we like. And all we have to do, just go here and type our description. Now I've noticed like this one, somehow it's not merged. So is it because we're adding a new row that's not merging it? Probably. So let's just try to apply that merged cell to all of these. All right, so now we have that problem, apparently. When we add a new row here, see, even though our formulas work, this cell, they use the merged cell, and this is why I hate merged cells. And now this is not a merged cell anymore. So we need to take care of that. So basically what we need to do, we need to get rid of all the merged cells and just do one simple row so we don't have this problem. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these. Let's go ahead and unmerge all of that. Now we shouldn't have any merged cells. This one is still merged. So I need to basically unmerge this entire column. Something here that goes across. See? Like unmerge that. Let's try this one more time. See, there's one more happening below. So let me unmerge this far. And there is something happening here too. I hate merged cells. So this is all the type of issues you have because of them. So up to here, it's fine. Here, we have this situation happening. So let's unmerge this. See, as I'm selecting, I know something is wrong by the time when I go one more and it jumps to the next column. I know something is happening. See, here. So we need to unmerge that as well. And I think I'm fine. I deleted all the weird stuff. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove this C and D columns. So we have just one column, so we don't have to worry about this mess. So now we can just resize this one to make it bigger. So I'm going to delete this and print and see if that fits. Seems pretty good. So it fits. So now when we add a new one, we don't have to worry about that whole situation because it's just going to be one cell. So there's no merged cell to fix. Okay, so all of that should be fine. And our notes are going to be now below here. So you can write your notes below if you have any notes. So that's pretty good. Maybe we just need a little bit of line above this, similar to like this line. Let me just select this, go under borders. And we're going to add a line above, which is this one. Let's make it a little gray so it's a little nicer looking. This total balance now looks a little too big to me. Something like this. So I think that sits pretty well. If I go under file print, we should have our invoice template. And let's just clear a few of these and put some numbers over here. So finally, I'll just take this adjusted total and make it dark. And maybe we'll take our tax amount too and color it the same. So basically these grayish ones are the ones we're entering here in the middle if you want to do some adjustments. And then here you have your tax rate, which is going to be manual entry. And I think that's good enough. Let's just rename this. And that should do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.